Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another video for you directed by yourselves from the polls that we've got in the community tabs on the channel. Now today is the turn of the Necron Chronomancer. I'll show you the polls in a moment, but before we do, random comment of the previous video goes to Joshua Glover 7280, who is a member. Planet 40k, you've got the aura expands 3 inches at the end of the fight phase if it kills a model in melee, and its aura works in melee. So a couple of things I did forget. That's in regards to Illumina Zara's ability, isn't it? Yeah, I tend to not really get much use of that ability, but you are correct, and it wasn't mentioned in the previous video. So shout out to you, Joshua Glover 7280. As for the poll we did was with the Command Barge, Chronomancer, Doom Scythe, and a Locust Lord, and the Chronomancer won with 35% of the vote at the time of closing. So we had 1,000 votes for that one. So these are building up quite nicely. Right, let's get into this Chronomancer then. Of course, one of the Cryptek characters within the Necrons Codex. Nice and cheap, 65 points. So we're going to go through some of the big questions. I believe I've got 7 questions today in regards to the Chronomancer. First one, what does he do? What does a Chronomancer do for our units? Now the reason you take a Cryptek in general is for the buffs and debuffs that are going to relate to your game. In this case, we've got 1 buff and 1 debuff. The debuff, sorry, we'll start with the debuff, is a -1 to hit with the Time Splitter Mantle. That's going to work in melee and at range. It's not quite stealth. I know in the past I've just called it stealth, but it's better than stealth because it also works in melee. So a -1 to hit our unit is a nice debuff for enemy units attacking us. As for the buff, you've got the 5 inches of movement after your unit has actually shot, which is the Chronometron ability. So in the shooting phase, if you're not within engagement range, you take your shots. After you've done that, you make a normal move of up to 5 inches. You can't charge, however, but most of the time you don't need to. Now this is pretty good for many different reasons. You can move into cover, you can move on to an objective, you can move backwards a bit to get out of range for your opponent's next shooting phase or your opponent's charge phase in the next turn. There's lots of different things you can do with movement, and I believe movement does win you games. Now this one is a question from one of the subscribers, and it's from Rank Cascade 9627. What unit is best to lead with the Chronomancer? Now if you remember guys, on the polls, if you can put down your questions on who it relates to, in which part of the poll, it may make the videos. And so like here with Rank Cascade 9627, they've made this video, so shout out to you. Basically, what unit is he best leading? You've got 2 options here, Necron Warriors and Necron Immortals. There's no Lich Guard option here. It is what it is, but both those battle line units are pretty slow. So the extra added movement is going to work quite nicely for those kind of units because they've got a lot of objective control, a lot of OC. You want to be getting them into the no man's land, holding objectives and just controlling the battlefield. Also, once you get onto those no man's land objectives, you're forcing your opponent's hand. They now have to deal with your Immortals or your Warriors that are now holding those objectives with a lot of OC. When what they really want to be doing is dealing with your Catan Shards and dealing with your Locust Heavy Destroyers and maybe your Hexmark Destroyers that are popped into the backfields or Tomb Blades that are scoring secondary points. They want to deal with those kind of units, but they're now forced to deal with your battle line units that are in the centre of the battle. So you're forcing your opponent's hand. Maybe you're making some of their weapons slightly redundant because these are only 1 wound models. And maybe if they're like 2 damage weapons, 3 damage weapons, and they're forced to fire at this unit, they've got to put it all into there to clear the unit one at a time because we are Necrons, reanimation and all that stuff. Yeah, you're forcing your opponent's hand. Now with the 2 abilities that the Chronomancer brings, it works good with both units because like the Warriors, you've got a 20-man unit of Warriors. Most of the time you take them in 20s. So that's two lots of abilities working on 20 models, whereas with the Immortals it is just 10. However, I do believe it is better with Immortals because the Immortals have one of their weapons, which is the Tesla Carbines, which has the assault keyword attached to the weapon, so it allows you to advance and still fire. So if you're going to be doing your movement of 5 inches, then potentially 6 more inches with the advanced rod, that's 11 as a potential max movement. You're then firing all your Tesla carbines, getting all your rerolls to wound roll because of their ability, and then you're doing a further 5 inches of movement, so it could be a potential of 16 inches there. Of course you could roll a 1 for that advanced roll, that's just dice, is what it is, but they are pretty rapid for just little standard infantry battle line units. Next question, should you pair a second character with a Chronomancer? It kind of depends on your plans. It depends on your plans mainly. You've got a lot of options from, well, first of all, the noble options. You've got Trazyn the Infinite, Imitate the Stormlord, the Overlord, and the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud. That's the first 4 options with the noble keyword, and then you can throw in the Royal Warden as well. Now the Overlord with the Shroud is probably the most useful with the Tesla Carbine Immortals, because now you're not having a potential of 16-inch movement, it is a 16-inch movement because they've got an auto advance of 6 inches. So it's a really good combination having the Translocation Shroud Overlord with a Chronomancer to get that maximum movement. If you've missed all the stuff about the Overlord with Translocation Shroud, check out one of our previous videos where we did speak about that. A Royal Warden is also another useful one here, because being able to fall back from engagement range, because if you're getting trapped in engagement range, it kind of sucks for Warriors and Immortals. They don't hit as hard as other units in the game in melee. We're more about the shooting side of the game rather than the melee side. We can do it, don't get me wrong, but you'd rather be shooting with all your Gauss weapons or your Tesla carbines. So being able to fall back and shoot and maybe recharge again if you wanted to for just 40 points I think is valuable. Next question is, should I add Cryptothralls to the unit? Now they of course can be attached to a Cryptek infantry model. They basically provide a 4+4 no pain save for the Cryptek only. They also fight on death on a 2+ as well, but there's only 2 models. The damage it's okay. I mean, it's not fantastic. There is 2 of them. They've got 3 wounds apiece, but it's 60 points for the pair of bucket bots, and it's not for me. It's not for me. I don't think it's worth paying that. Fight on death kind of stinks anyway. Personally, I think that. So yeah, for me, it's a no. Is he the best Cryptek leader? We've got 5 Cryptek leaders, so not including Illuminazares here because he's not a leader. He is a Cryptek, but not a leader. With the 5 options, each adds their own unique spin to a unit. If you want more offense, you go with the Plasmancer with the 5+ critical hit rolls. If you want more defense, you've got Orokin the Diviner with a 4+ invulnerable save, or a Technomancer with the 5+ no pain save, or the Chronomancer that has the best of both worlds. You've got the -1 to hit the unit, but also that extra movement, which I think is good. He can fit both ways. The Psychomancer is the 5th one, but he's the dud of the lot here. 99% of the time, you do not need a Psychomancer. And maybe for fun themed lists, but that is literally about it. Now, as for the best Cryptek though, that's a video in itself. That really, I could spend an hour talking about that. I really could. It comes down to the unit that you're attaching him to, Immortals or Warriors. It comes down to your play style. It's coming down to maybe your local meta, if you're not going on, not talking about tournaments and stuff. And it also comes down to what other units are in your list. If you've got a lot of aggressive units in your list, then you're not going to necessarily need a Plasmancer. You want something more defensive, and vice versa. If you've got a lot of defensive units in your list, maybe you want a Plasmancer to pump up the damage output for your entire list. Chronomancer again kind of goes both ways, which makes him quite a valuable option overall. There's one more thing here to mention while we are here. The Chronomancer, out of the non-epic heroes, is the only one that's got his own invulnerable save of a 4+. Orokin the Diviner does also have one. He's an epic hero though. So that is value in itself in terms of Cryptek leaders. But yeah, as for picking the best one, if I had to pick one on the spot, that is a tricky one. I do like the Technomancers, but I do reserve them for Canoptek Wraiths, so it's quite difficult. If I'm talking about Immortals or Warriors, I think Plasmancers are the best, but Chronomancers are not that far behind for me. Does he only work in the Canoptek Court? Being a Cryptek model, does he only work in that detachment? No. He works in most detachments. I'll go through them. I mean, let's start with the Canoptek Court because we're already there. There's a lot of buffs and bonuses with the Canoptek Court with the Power Matrix. As soon as you attach him to those Immortals or Warriors, you're re-rolling 1s or potentially re-rolling everything in the Power Matrix. There's also enhancements and stratagems that will only work with Cryptek models. There's an enhancement to give the units infiltrate, and then there's also the enhancement to reroll ones to wound and things like that. That won't work so much with the Immortals because they do that anyway, but with the Warriors that could be quite useful. You've also got one of the stratagems, Curse of the Cryptek. I'll put it on the screen for you because I think it's one of the cooler ones. If he does actually get destroyed, all your Canoptek units, they add one to the hit rolls and one to the wound rolls against the unit that killed your Chronomancer. So yeah, they've been cursed for the rest of the game. That's just not for one phase, that's for the entire game, which I think is pretty epic. As for the other detachments, the Awakened Dynasty is very useful, +1 to hit if you add him as a leader, which is a tidy ability in itself. You've got loads of cool perks when you add him to a unit. You can teleport off with the Veil of Darkness, bring him back from the dead with the Protocol of Eternal Revenant. You can add the Assault keyword to those Gorse weapons with the Protocol of Sunstorm. You've got the Protocol of Conquering Tyrant for full rerolls potentially. There's a lot more, in my opinion, with the Awakened Dynasty for a Chronomancer than there is for the Canoptek Court, in my opinion. The Hypercrypt Legion isn't something to ignore either. There's plenty of stuff in there, lots of movement shenanigans, whether it's the Hyperphasen or with the Monolith, because we're infantry here. You've got a Deep Strike enhancement, you've got full rerolls to hit as an enhancement with the Arisen Tyrant. You've got Cosmic Precision, which is really cool, coming in 3 inches away from enemy models, and that could just dump you straight onto an objective. I mean, you could do that with anyone, to be fair. It doesn't have to be the Chronomancer. And then finally, the Abasis Phalanx. Well, no, not finally, there is 2 more. The Abasis Phalanx doesn't require a Chronomancer, but he will pair quite nicely with that Translocation Shrouded Overlord, as we mentioned earlier. And then he'll gain all the buffs as well, which sort of goes into damage, which we'll talk about in a moment. The last one was the Annihilation Legion. You won't see much of him in that detachment. But ultimately, you've got 4 potential detachments there with the Chronomancer to make use of. Now, going back to that damage, does he deal much damage? Short answer, not really. Not really. I mean, the weapon is okay, the Aeon Stave. It used to be much better, if I remember correctly. It used to be a little bit better. Now it's not as good. You might pop off a model here or there throughout an entire game. It looks better than it is. Strength 5 -1/1 damage, but you're hitting on 4s, and yeah, just don't expect too much from it is what I mean. Does he have any other synergy in the Codex? Yes, a little bit. I mean, he works with those little Canoptek Scarabs, where you gain 1 OC per model if you're within 6 inches of a Cryptek, so those Scarabs will now be not 0 OC anymore, they'll now be 1 OC. I mean, the likelihood is you're going to have a battle line unit with him, so you probably won't need the OC. But those Scarabs also reduce enemy OC, so it can be quite a tidy swing of OC on those No Man's Land objectives. Other synergy, you could talk about the Command Barge here. Particularly useful for the Resurrection Orb, and particularly useful with the Chronomancer, because with that extra movement that the Chronomancer provides after shooting, you can get within range again of that Command Barge. So you could start off in your command phase nowhere near the barge. The barge has got quite a tidy movement within itself. Is it 10 or 12 inches? I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's moving fairly good. And if you're moving potentially 16 inches, depending on the unit and all that stuff, towards the barge, you can make it so that you can use a Resurrection Orb at the end of the movement phase and get D6 Immortals back, which is okay. It's okay. I mean, it's a little bit of a situational one there, but there's something there. Is he worth 65 points, or is it 65 points well spent? Is what I put on the screen. The argument here is whether you can save 65 points and just not include him at all. The -1 to hit penalty for your opponent and the added movement of 5 inches, is that worth 65 points? I mean, there is more to it, of course. We need to remember that minor damage output that he can provide. He might kill a few models, maybe that will be 15 to 30 points worth for your opponent to lose. I might be being generous there, but in some games that will happen. And if he's costing 65 points, then basically, in terms of damage output, you're regaining a third of that back, roughly. So the remaining points, let's say 40 to 45 points to gain a -1 to hit for your unit. Could be a large warrior unit, toughness 5 immortal unit. That's quite valuable, and the extra movement is massively valuable. So would I spend the 40 to 45 points on that? Yeah, I probably would. But that is another hot discussion point in itself. But I think you would. I mean, a Necron immortal unit, a minimum size unit, is 75 points on its own. So it's only 10 points more than having a Chronomancer. And you can have another 5 guys doing their own thing, shooting their own targets, being on their own objective. OC 10 in total, you could have that. But a Chronomancer I think does hold some value. Enhancement value as well, you can stick an enhancement on there. And if you're going back into those detachments, Canoptek Court and so on. So there is value there, and I believe it is 65 points well spent. So that's 8 important questions for the Chronomancer. Make sure you keep your eyes open on the community poll for the next poll to get involved in for the next unit that we're going to talk about, and talk about those big important questions. Guys, I'll see you in the next one.